So this video is going to show you how to make a fruit crumble. So before I get started, I have got myself an oven-proof dish to actually make my crumble in. Now these can be any sizes, any shapes that you've got in at home, but obviously something that's suitable to go into the oven. So it could be a metal one like this, it could be a glass container, it could be a china dish, but something that's suitable to go into the oven. Okay, I've also put my oven on, so I've put that on to gas mark 6, which is 200 degrees, ready to start heating up. I've got my flour and my margarine here ready in the bowl, and I'll explain that to you in a second. I have got my sugar ready weighed out, and I've got my apples ready, so I'm all ready to get going. So to start with, okay, we actually put the flour and the margarine into your mixing bowl, and we're going to use a process here called the rubbing in method to mix that in. So it basically means that we coat all of the flour in margarine. It's a lot easier if you actually break that margarine up and then coat the pieces as well before you actually start rubbing in. Now the important thing to make sure you're doing here is not actually squishing it all into a ball. We're not looking for a ball of dough to go on top of your crumble. We're looking, obviously, as the name suggests, for a crumble. So we want it to be nice and crumbly, not lumpy. So make sure that you are actually pulling the flour up. Okay, it's easier if I do it with one hand because you can probably see then a lot easier. Picking it up with our hands and just rubbing it. Okay, slow that down as well a bit. So rubbing it between our fingers and our thumbs. Okay, I'm not quite sure how well that's catching that on there for you, but you're just doing a rubbing process. Okay, we're not doing this in the bowl and trying to mix it in that way. We're lifting it out to make sure that we coat all of the flour. And as I said, just gently picking it up and rubbing it through our fingers using our thumb. So we need to keep doing that until all of the lumps of margarine have gone, because obviously if you were going to be eating this crumble, it wouldn't be very pleasant if you just came across a lump of margarine on the top of it. So we need to do that until all of it is rubbed in. Now, depending on the size of your dish, it may be that you need more of the crumble to go on top, or you may need less of the crumble. As a guide, what we need to do is use half as much fat as what you are using flour. Okay, and I use the word fat because I've used margarine here, but you could just as easily be using butter. So if you've got a large dish that you're going to make this in, it could be that you need to use 200 grams of flour, which would then need 100 grams of fat with it. So however much flour you use, okay, we actually then use half the amount in margarine. Right, now the way to check that we've rubbed all of that in properly, if you just shake your bowl from side to side, okay, what you should be able to see there is some lumps have actually come together. With the lumps then, check if there's still lumps of margarine, you need to carry on rubbing it in. If they are just lumps of mixture that have started to come together, we can just actually break those up. Now, if you do find that you've got very, very warm hands, I'm lucky I've got cold hands, which is great for doing things like this and for making pastry, which is the same initial process. If you've got very hot hands, you'll be absolutely excellent at making shortbread, but that's not what the aim of this one is. So it may be that if it starts coming together and clumping together too much, that you need to just add a little bit more flour in there, because as I said, you may have warm hands, which may start to melt that margarine. Okay, so that's all rubbed in there now. Okay, as I said, these are just lumps of the mixture coming together. So we can tip in our sugar. Now you could use a spoon to mix that if you've wanted to, but you've already put your hands in that anyway, so I'm just going to mix that around with my hands, and that's going to be put now to one side while we prepare the apples. Now what you may want to do into here, you may want to add some cinnamon, you may want to add some porridge oats, you may want to use some coconut in there, and that's fine. So there are additions you can actually put into there. Okay, so I've just cleaned my surface down I've put my crumble, okay, still all there, just over to the side until we actually need that. So the next thing that I'm going to do is peel my apples. Now you could use apples, you could use pears. It may be that you want to use a range of summer fruits like strawberries and raspberries. You may want to do a rhubarb crumble, in which case I would suggest that you cook the crumble up first. But whereas in the past we've always traditionally used cooking apples and stewed those up in school, we've actually started doing this with eating apples because it actually works just as well, and we don't need to actually cook those up first. So I'm going to peel my apple. That's because the person I'm giving this crumble to doesn't like the skin on there. If I was making it for myself, I would keep the skin on there because it does add to the fibre content. And making sure you're holding your apple with your fingers completely out of the way. Okay, we can just use the peeler. If you're going to do this, I got to be honest, okay, I actually find it a whole lot easier peeling with a vegetable knife, but that's not the safest way of doing it. So if you have got a peeler at home, I would rather you use a peeler to do that. Okay, and just peel away from you, and as I said, holding your fruit between your thumb and your finger to make sure that they're not getting in the way of the blade. Okay, so the apples are peeled. Now the reason we do the crumble first is because the apples will start going brown once we've peeled them and once we start cutting them. So it is an idea to get your crumble mixture first so that you can get your apples cut and into your dish and then actually finish the process off. So however you're going to hold your apple, if you want to hold it with the bridge hold, okay, if you want to hold it with the claw grip, but just making sure that you keep your fingers out of the way. If you actually cut each side of the core, okay, because we don't actually want the core going into our crumble, then you can lay your apple down flat and we can just, okay, one way to definitely make sure that you don't cut your fingers is to use your hand on top of the knife to actually cut that down. So then when you've got your pieces of apple, okay, just with the bridge hold there, hold your apple and you can just cut it up into smaller pieces. Okay, now exactly the same as the crumble topping, depending on how much fruit you actually want in here. It may be that you need to use more or less than the 3 that I've got here. I've actually peeled 3. I don't think for the size of my dish I'm going to need the 3 apples, but it doesn't need to go to waste because obviously we can just eat whatever apple is left. But once the process, that cutting process has started, there are enzymes in the apple which will start to react with the air and it will go brown. So it is important to try and do this step very, very quickly. So once you've got your pieces of apple, okay, you can pop those into the dish and then you will be able to gauge from there, okay, exactly how many of your apples you want. So rather than what I've done this morning, which is just peel all 3 apples, you may want to peel them one at a time so you can check exactly what you want to use. So I have half filled my dish there with apple. I used about 2.5 of the apples after. As I said, it won't go to waste though because I will just eat that up. Now exactly the same with the crumble. Okay, very much dependent on how thick you actually like the layer to be. But what we're going to do, you just pick the crumble up with your hands and spread it over the top of your apples. Okay, now as I said, the thickness is going to be very dependent on how thick you actually like it. So we're just going to add, I actually like there to be quite a thick layer of crumble, as does the person, as I said, that I'm going to be giving this to. So I'm probably going to put all of that on here. Okay, just spreading it around with my fingers. If you notice though, what I'm not doing, I'm not compacting it. Okay, I've seen a lot of pupils do that in the past. They seem to think that the crumble needs to actually be pressed right down and compacted right down. That doesn't, well, it shouldn't really happen, because if you do that, you're going to actually then not give any steam the chance to escape, and it's going to actually all start cracking anyway. So it's a really good idea, as I said, to just leave it, however tempting it may be. Okay, just actually leave it nice and crumbly looking. Okay, hence the name. Okay, so once you get to the last bit, then you can just sprinkle that in out of the bowl. I would do it initially with your hand because you've got then that little bit more control over it. Oh, I should have added, sorry. Before I put the crumble on, you could, if you wanted to, add some other fruit. You could put some raisins in there. You could actually put maybe some cherries in there. You may want to put some blueberries in there. So there's always the option of adding extra fruits as well. It could be that you want to try something completely different and you fancy doing a pear crumble or a peach crumble. Okay, and that is obviously fine as well. So this is ready to go into the oven. It's going to go in the oven now for about 12 to 15 minutes, and I will show you what it looks like when it's done. Okay, so there's the finished crumble. Okay, obviously I took that out of the oven using oven gloves. I didn't use my hands, and it's still very hot, so I'm not going to pick it up. Okay, just use the pot holder to pick it up. So you can see from that, okay, that it's just gone a nice golden brown, so that's actually ready to eat now. That's taken about 15 minutes to do. Now again, some pupils like to actually sprinkle some sugar over the top of that to actually serve it. I just keep it exactly as it is because I think myself that it's going to be sweet enough from the apples, and depending on whether you're going to serve it with ice cream or cream or custard, okay, that will actually sweeten it up a bit as well. Okay, so I hope you enjoy making that one, and I look forward to seeing your photos.